All right, good morning. I give that a C. Good morning. All right, now when a video doesn't work, who do you think feels stressed? Let's give a round of applause to the IT department. Yeah, hang in there. We'll get it all right. And thank you to everybody else who's done all the organization here, the wonderful signage, and just pulling this event together. It's really tremendous. During the course of the day today, you're going to get nuggets of wisdom about how to empower yourself and advance in your careers. And I'm here right now to give you the first one, the first nugget of wisdom. We've heard from Lynette. We heard from Lisa. We heard from Lois. I'm about to introduce a woman named Loree. So clearly, if your first name begins with the letter L, there are bold and wonderful things before you. All right. So my name's Peter Bashar. I'm a member of the Board of Trustees here and chair of the Veterans Committee. And I wanted to say that we challenged ourselves on the board several years ago to answer three simple questions. The first was, is there a compelling need to try to lend support to the veteran community in the U.S.? There are more than 2 million individuals who have served in the armed forces in Iraq and Afghanistan. The volume of people returning to the United States is at the greatest level since World War II. Pretty extraordinary. So we answered that first question with a resounding yes. And the second question is, does this college, does John Jay have a singular voice or a singular role to play in trying to provide support? So we said to the school, well, how many veterans are there here at John Jay? And the initial answer was, well, we don't know, because people don't necessarily self-identify themselves. So we said, well, let's give the best go that we can. And folks like Mindy Bockstein and Jane Rosengarten and Welby and so many other people here really made an effort. And there were 141 veterans in the graduating class 2 years ago, just in a single class. And we started to get a sense of, you're really talking about a veteran community of 500 or 600 people within a school of 15,000. That is an extraordinary percentage of veterans, maybe one of the highest in the country outside of the service academies. So we answered the second question with a resounding yes. And indeed, a substantial number here are women. More than 20% of the student population who are veterans are here, much higher than the percentage in the armed forces overall. So then the third question is, if there's a need, and if we have a voice, how do we actually help? And we've tried to break that really into three buckets of attracting the best candidates to come here to this amazing campus, help them transition while they're here at the school, and then help launch them into their civilian careers with jobs in corporations and nonprofits. And we are so grateful here at John Jay for our colleagues from J.P. Morgan Chase, who really, everybody's been great, but J.P. Morgan has really been just the leader of this effort in corporate America. And if we can give a round of applause to Lois and to Brian and to so many other people who have helped in J.P. Morgan. Okay, so that brings us finally to our distinguished keynote speaker here. And what an extraordinary woman she is. So I spoke to her on the phone a couple days ago. She said, I grew up in Southern California. I went to Pacific Union College, and while I was there, I wanted to become a doctor. So I took organic chemistry, one of the toughest, nastiest courses. If you can get through that, you're pretty much ready for anything. And she said, we were visited by a military recruiter during the time when I was in this organic chemistry. And I was facing the daunting prospect of paying for medical school and not knowing whether I would be able to do it. So the military recruiter said, why don't you come by? We're having a recruiting fair. And so Loree Sutton, without telling anybody in her family, any of her friends, slinked away to go visit with the military recruiter. She walks in the door, and there are representatives from each branch of the service. Navy, Marines, Air Force, Coast Guard, and Army. Well, she's only allotted herself 10 minutes for this visit. the line behind the Army is the shortest of all. And that is the way that Loree Sutton's career was launched. She then spent 30 years, extraordinary years, within the armed services, and in the Army in particular, was the chief, highest-ranking psychiatrist, served as the commander of a number of the medical centers at Fort Hood and Fort Belvoir. Just an extraordinary series of experiences, deployed to Kuwait, to Egypt, to Saudi Arabia, to Iraq, and on down the line. And then in 2007, President Bush nominates her to become a brigadier general. And you all in this room, you have a sense of what that means, just in general, to be a flag officer in the armed forces. There are something like over 2 million active and retired members and reservists in the armed forces. And if you get into the ranks of the flag officers, generals and admirals, that is pretty high company. There's something like 900. And how many women do you think there are in this extraordinary? Not that many. 10? It's a little bit more than 10. Maybe in the Army there are about 10. And this woman has done all these things. She's gotten so many awards that it's literally, I mean, it is just a page long. Seemingly everyone has the word merit in it. Legion of Merit, the Military Medical Merit Badge, the Defense Meritorious Service. The list goes on, together with Bronze Stars. So would you please give General Sutton the most rousing and amazing reception? Let's all stand up for her.
Well, so much for my guidance, Peter, that you would keep it brief. But it is truly a privilege to be with you all today. Can you all hear me back there? Okay. First of all, I applaud John Jay on this, its 50th anniversary, for pioneering today's symposium. I will tell you not to worry about that video with Senator Gillibrand. I've had the privilege of working with Senator Gillibrand over these last couple of years. I'm just going to take a moment and see if I can channel the senator. Were we to have seen that video, she would have said something like, first of all, welcome to New York. She would have said, I know that there are women veterans, there are retirees, there are men here because we're all one team. There are Republicans, there are Democrats, there are independents, there are widows, there are widowers, there are family members, there are members of the National Guard, there are members of the reserves, active duty, there are folks who served before 1980, whether or not you went to combat. There are folks who served from 1980, kind of like I did. I came in 1981 and regrettably ripped the uniform off one little tag by one little tag. Those of you who have taken the uniform off know how hard it is. But in 2010, it was time to pursue the same mission, but just in a little different uniform. Because, you know, for those of us who have served in uniform, there are things that we can only do in uniform. And for those of you who are still in uniform, enjoy enjoy every single moment in uniform. It's such a privilege to serve, to be trusted with America's treasure, our sons and daughters, every single day. And then when it's time to take that uniform off, you know, so much of the time we think that this journey, and Senator Gillibrand and I have had a chance to talk about this a little, it doesn't end when we step out of uniform, whether we've been in for a tour of duty or for 30 years. Actually, we're only halfway back when we step out of uniform. Because at that point, we've got to figure out, okay, I know what I've done in uniform. You know, I've been part of a team. I've learned, you know, skills. I've lived by a code of values. I know what duty means. I know what honor means. I know what teamwork means. I know what it is to know that without a second's hesitation, I'd take a bullet for my battle buddy. And I know what it means and what it feels like to know that my battle buddies have my back and would take a bullet for me. But you know, then we've got to figure out, okay, once a warrior, always a warrior. Sometimes the word warrior gets a little bit of a bad rap. It's not someone who's a Rambo figure who somehow takes joy in killing. No, far from it. The ancient roots of the word warrior have to do with someone who lives by a code of values and is committed to serving others who need just a little help, a little support, and yes, a lot of justice, as John Jay is committed to. And so the challenge then becomes crafting a new and honorable identity as a senior warrior, someone who is committed to service every bit as much as we were when we were in uniform, and who reaches back to help one's fellow brothers and sisters in uniform who are coming behind us. Because after all, none of us get to where we're going alone. And I will tell you, Senator Gillibrand will also say, were she here today, she would say, we must work together. You know, when Senator Gillibrand, she put together the Military Justice Improvement Act, and at first it was billed as this extreme position. How could she do this, the junior senator from New York? Who does she think she is? She looks like she walked out of a sorority and doesn't even belong here. Those were some of the things that were said. Well, she stepped out of the gates first of all and took on Don't Ask, Don't Tell. There was not a single political consultant that advised her to take on that issue first up, but absolutely led the way. And she has been fearless, absolutely fearless on this issue. And anytime you get a coalition bringing together Ted Cruz, Nancy Pelosi, Kirsten Gillibrand, and Rand Paul all on the same side of an issue, you know you're either doing something really right or really wrong. And I'll tell you, she is absolutely leading the way. She's a fearless leader, and in New York we are so fortunate to have her political leadership. So I know, let's just give her a big old round of applause. Now I know that we're a little short on time, so what I'd like to do is just offer a couple of thoughts, and then Mindy, where is Mindy? Mindy's out making things happen and look effortless. There's Mindy. So Mindy's going to keep me on track here, because I want to have a few minutes to have just some Q&A. That's where the fun is. That's where the learning is. And then you'll launch into the day with the breakout sessions. And I'll be glad to hear all about it at the reception at the end of the day. But let me just share with you a few thoughts. You know, Madeleine Albright once said, there is a special place in hell reserved for women who do not help other women. Now, and there's a very special place in New York City for women who are committed and men who are committed to helping other women, and you showed up here today, and I thank you for that. It's not, yeah, there you go. And it's not just about men and women teaming up to help other men and women. It's also about bringing generations together so that the Vietnam and the Korean and the World War II veterans who have served in uniform, so that we can link up with them, we can learn from their wisdom. And by the way, let me just give a special shout out to the Vietnam veterans. I'll tell you a little secret. In 1973, when I was in 8th grade, I was kicked out of school because I refused to take off my POW MIA bracelet. The school said that it was jewelry. I said, au contraire, it is not. So that's where my bond with the Vietnam veterans really started, but it's been so heartening over these last several years to see the Vietnam veterans who are manning the airports, welcoming our military home, who are standing guard with the Patriot Guard riders to guard the sanctity of memorial services, and who are committed to the mantra of never again will one generation of veterans abandon another. We owe you so much. Thank you, Vietnam veterans. And so we need to join forces, all generations, including our post-9/11 veterans. Who all's here from post-9/11 service? Great. Who all's here from 80 to 9/11? Terrific. Who all's here from before 1980? Wow. Before 1970? Right there. Okay, sir. Congratulations. You know, one of the folks who's really been a leader in this notion of bringing generations together is a guy named Robert Safian. He's the editor for the journal Fast Company. Some of you may be familiar with it. You know, it's sort of, its sweet spot is the nexus between business, technology, and leadership. And a couple of years ago, in the January 2012 issue, he authored an article that talked about this notion of generation flux. And he talked about how we are moving into this era where it's no longer about demographics in terms of age and race and religion and ethnicity, as important as those factors are. He says, really, it's about mindset. It's about neurographics. It's about having a mindset that understands we've got to have our knees bent at all times. We've got to be looking for opportunities. We've got to be reaching out, working as a team, collaborating in a complex world with so many needs and so few resources. It doesn't make sense to do anything other than that. And it's a lot more fun. And so I would invite each of us, as we're here today, and not just today as a one-off, one-time event, because I know, in talking with the folks here at John Jay College, and Peter, I know your commitment and the commitment we've heard from Lynette and Lisa at CUNY and Lois with Morgan Stanley Chase, Morgan Chase Stanley, what is it, Brian? J.B. Morgan Chase, okay, there we go. And the entire coalition of firms that have come together, the recruiters who are here today, the members of the faith community, veterans, men, women, professors, you know, old soldiers who are committed to still serving. We're all in this together. And it's really veterans and our family members leading the way. So with that, do we have time, Mindy, for just a couple of questions, maybe Q&A? Dana? Great. Any thoughts, any questions, anything that you want to lay out on the table as we launch this Women's Veterans Empowerment Symposium today? Is there somebody right? Oh, right here. Yes, sir. What do I think the biggest challenge will be? What's your name, sir? Evan. Great, with Verizon. Okay, thanks. What will be the biggest challenge in supporting veterans in general, women in particular? Well, let me just say this. This is a challenge I was just talking with Lynette about before the program started. When people ask me, what makes this generation, the post-9/11 generation, different from its forebears? And typically, that's a question that is tinged with a little bit of, you know, General Sutton, aren't we just kind of coddling this generation of veterans? I mean, after all, our World War II veterans went and served until the war was over, and gosh, what's going on here? Well, my answer is, I've never found it particularly useful to compare one generation of veterans with another. It doesn't work much better than it does across the kitchen table, right? Who had it worse? It doesn't really go very far. But I think it is useful to unpack the relevant similarities and dissimilarities. Similarities, of course, war and the experience of service has, you know, good people die in battle. the experience that we've already talked about, the skills, the honor, the values that we live by in service, the perspective that we bring back to a nation that sorely needs that kind of dedication to teamwork and service. But when you look at the dissimilarities, for as much as our forebears have gone through, let's just look at, for example, World War II. We knew from our research that after 150 days, the average rifleman in World War II, 98% of them decompensated. And so we knew the importance of rotating so that soldiers at the front lines could have breaks. Well, the good news is the enemy in World War I and II had the decency to wear a uniform. There was a front line, there was a rear area where one could be safe and take rotations, and the entire nation, the entire world was behind this effort. So the social context was very different. And when you look at the one factor that has shown itself to be most important in determining sort of the long-term aftermath of combat experience, it's days of exposure. So by that measure, up through 9/11, combat exposure, measures in days, was about, it varies between 100 and 300 days from World War I up through 9/11. I will tell you, talking with our 9/11, post-9/11 veterans, 500 days, 1,000 days, 1,500 days or more, with repetitive and successive and continuing deployments, and 24/7 exposure to threat. This exposure creates, and we know this now from neuroscience, I'll try not to get too geeky on you here, okay, but this gets back to your question, is that kind of exposure will dysregulate the healthiest of nervous systems. And you can kind of get stuck on high, you know, you're hyperactive, you're irritable, you're angry, you're, riding ninja bikes around, you're in pain. Some of this may sound familiar. We won't ask for a show of hands here. Or you can get stuck on low, depression, isolation, sort of feeling checked out and numb. And because our mind-body systems, we are wired for resilience, we strive for balance. But when we're out of balance, striving for that balance takes us back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And so today, if I go into not just the VA, any health care facility and describe this kind of up and down cycle of symptoms, chances are I'm going to get diagnosed with bipolar disorder and I'm going to be put on medications. And I may have bipolar disorder, but I would submit to you, until we re-regulate and rebalance, and there are self-regulation skills that the research has absolutely come forward and led the way in establishing their efficacy, until we reset the human nervous system to see really what we're dealing with, we're chasing the effects of that trauma dysregulation. So let me give you something, a tool. I gave you all that stuff as a backdrop, a tool, iChill. Gary Trudeau, right here, Doonesbury, you couldn't make it up. Gary Trudeau has been such a advocate for veterans. A few years ago, this came out of working with some women veterans at the LAVA, and he funded an app. It's free, it's downloadable to any platform. It will take you through these self-regulation skills. And I'll just close, I know we're tight on time here, but let me just give you a little example of how these skills work. So we were working with these Vietnam veterans, and they'd been battle buddies for years, but their lives were just more constricted than ever. They learned these skills. So one of the veterans came back after one weekend and said, he says, I got to tell you this story. I heard about, one of the big hardware stores, I think it was Lowe's, had a veterans discount. He said, I hadn't been in a store for years. He said, but I'd learned these skills, and I thought, gosh, I'm going to try this out. So he got his stuff, he brings it up to the checkout stand, and he says, I'm a veteran, this is my stuff, I'd like my veterans discount. The woman at the checkout stand says, oh, I'm so sorry, sir. The veterans discount is on Thursday, and today's Saturday. Okay, the overarching skill is sensory tracking. He is now tracking the rage that is emanating from the very core of his being, right? Second skill, grounding. It's an ancient skill. He places his hands on the counter, and he senses into the firm support of the counter, supporting his hands. He then shifts his attention and he focuses on his feet and the firm support of the ground supporting his feet. Next skill, resourcing. He takes out his cell phone. His resource is his little granddaughter. He's looking at his granddaughter and he's intensifying that resource, naming her name, thinking about the things they love to do together. And by so doing, these very simple skills, he's able to stay within his resilient zone, calmly ask the clerk, "May I speak to your manager?" Sat down, spoke with the manager. The manager said, you're really right. That's a dumb policy. We should make it for every vet every day. He changed store-wide policy. As he was telling this story, tears running down his face, he said, this is the first time in over 40 years that I've had any hope that I could actually live a life worth living. He said, the reason I hadn't been in a store for years is before, he says, I would have been up over that counter going for her neck. They would have called security. I would have been in jail. He says, I'm not dumb. That's why I didn't go into stores. And so coming back to your question, it's not just for veterans coming back from their experiences, but also for all of us living in modern society. We are currently living in an environment with our 24/7 connectivity, God bless our smartphones and ways of keeping in contact, but our mind-body systems were never designed for this kind of a load. So whether it means veterans in general or all of us together, it's another area where I think veterans really can lead the way. When it comes to women veterans, now I will say there are some significant differences there that I think we really need to be mindful of. First of all, as women, we really, don't often raise our hands and identify as veterans, do we? If we're in a club and, the American Legion, bless their hearts, comes up and is slapping all the guys on the back and saying, let me buy you a beer, and they're telling, there I was, war stories, what do? We beat feet. We don't stick around. For many women veterans with children, I will tell you, I don't have children of my own, but having worked with so many women veterans, it's not that women veterans that we love our children any more than our male counterparts, but there is a different load that society places on us and a different load that we place on ourselves. I will guarantee, Brian Williams, that in the course of your career, nobody has ever asked you, how can you serve in uniform? How can you put your job first before your family? Women veterans get that all the time. Now, conversely, we still don't have a place in our society for the role of civilian men who are married to women veterans. And I will guarantee you that military spouses, women military spouses, have never been asked the question, oh, yeah, Joe, so you're going to follow your wife around the rest of her career? So different loads, different needs across the generations, and we won't know about those needs and those differences unless we talk, unless we learn from each other. So I wanted to just close with a tribute to our forebears. This is little Rosie Riveter. We do stand on the shoulders of giants, and as Rosie reminds us, we can do it. There is no challenge too great, and it'll take all of us working together. So let's roll up our sleeves and get after it. Thank you so much.